Hi and welcome or welcome back. I am a grease pencil artist trying to learn geometry nodes, and this is my second piece that combines grease pencil with geometry nodes. I am already starting to feel more confident with this tool. I am so proud of the results that I've gotten so far, and as you'll see, I already learned a lot in this video. So this video is going to cover exactly how I made the geometry nodes part of this artwork. That's the waves crashing at the bottom here. But if you're interested in seeing every stage of my process, including real-time footage and additional blend files, I have shared the whole process behind this artwork over on my Patreon and also on my Gumroad here. But today is about geometry nodes. And here is my geometry nodes plan. I want to add geometry nodes at the base of this 3D model. So I'm imagining I'll create a plane at the bottom of this horse and have stylized crashing waves coming out of it. I want to make a collection of hand-drawn grease pencil wave objects and instance those onto the plane. Some ways that I'm challenging myself this month with the geometry nodes. Direction matters. I want all of the instances to go upwards from the plane. I'm not sure how to do this yet, but I'm pretty sure there's a way. 2, I want to randomize the rotation around only one axis. I should know how to do this, but it will be my first time doing so. And perhaps the most daunting, 3, I want to animate the scale. I'm imagining a version where the waves grow and then shrink like a roiling, bubbling sea, but at random intervals from one another. And I have no idea how to do this. So let's just go and see what happens. So to start, what to do? Okay, let me start by drawing the waves. With Shift A, I'll create a new grease pencil blank object, and I'll have each wave be in its own object. I'll quickly move it to the side with G and Y, because I want to draw the wave starting from the object's origin. That's this orange dot here. In draw mode, I'll select the stroke placement at origin, meaning my strokes will get drawn in line with my object's origin, and I'll set the drawing plane to side, because I want to draw a 2D wave in line with my Z-Y axes. So I found this image, which is roughly the style that I was imagining for the waves. I'm using the grease pencil brush and the black material that comes with grease pencil blank objects. It's just a solid stroke material with no special settings. Since I plan on being mindful of the direction of these waves in 3D space, I'm drawing them going upwards, starting from where their origin lies along the Y-axis. That's this line here. And I'm trying to not go lower than this line. There was a lot of trial and error with this first wave. I was figuring out the style and I erased and redrew lines a lot. But after this, it got easier with each wave. To create the other waves, I go into object mode, duplicate this object with Shift D, move it to the side with Y, and then in edit mode, A to select all strokes, X to delete them, and let's draw wave number 2. So far, the 2 waves that I have are pretty large. They're also the same size. So I do also want to add some variety to my waves by making these next 2 smaller. And then with my geometry node setup that I have planned, I'm going to have a lot of overlap of these waves, and currently they are just transparent. But I want the waves in front to hide the waves behind them. So to do that, I'll create a new material and just make it a simple solid fill material. To add this to all of my wave objects, I can Control Select all of them. And then in this dropdown, I press on Copy Material to Selected. Then, back in draw mode, I'll select a light vertex color, and I can draw a solid fill base around the wave. But why? Why this? Do I have to turn off lights for this grease pencil layer? Okay, yes, I did. I still don't know why it was so dark though, wow. Anyways, now it's showing up on top of my wave lines, which is not what I want. So in edit mode, I can select this fill stroke and right-click to send it to the back. Perfect. Now to do the same for the other waves. And beautiful! Well, good enough for now. I'll design them better later on. I just want good enough to set up my geometry nodes. To start doing that, I'll right-click and create a new collection just to put all of my waves into. Then I want to add a plane, which I'll position at the bottom of my water horse where there's already the grease pencil base. Now, into the geometry nodes workspace, let us go. I'll move the plane out of this collection before I forget, and then I'll give it a geometry node modifier. So I want to add an instances on points node, and then I can drag the wave collection into the scene, and I want to plug it in as the instances. Separate and also reset children, and then pick instance. This causes one of the waves to be randomly picked for each. Well, it seems like it's currently each corner of the plane. So I want to increase and randomize the distribution of these waves along this plane. So that's with, I don't know. One second, I have to check my blend file from last month to remember what I'm doing. All right, so I'm looking for distribute points on faces. So this is interesting. I vaguely remembered what this node was. And so I was looking for it in the instances grouping of nodes, but I couldn't find it. But I was looking for it there because I've always used it in relation to instances. But I guess if I think about it, it doesn't directly impact the instances themselves, so it impacts the mesh geometry. So this node distributes the points of the grid all along its surface, and so that indirectly impacts the instancing because each instance is linked to a point. But at its core, it is a node for modifying the mesh and not the instances. I don't know, I did not fully grasp that last month. I just wanted to share that. I think I'm starting to figure out some of the logic of nodes, so yay for that. So I will add it and oh my gosh, this is looking so cool. It's actually already really close to what I had in mind. Wow. I'm going to add a join geometry node here just because I want to illustrate something and I want to see the grid for this. So notice how the waves are all jutting up from the top of the plane. They are jutting up from this side, I think, because this is the side with the outside face of the plane. You can see what I mean if I turn on face orientation in this dropdown. So 3D objects in Blender have an inside and an outside. For example, with a cube, the faces have their outer sides facing outwards, and the inner faces or the inner sides are facing inwards. You know, that's pretty intuitive. The blue outside faces are on the outside. And the plane is basically like a chopped off face of a cube. So that's why the top is like the outside and the bottom is equivalent to the inside. And from my understanding of Blender, the insides of objects are not really ever used for anything. And I assume that's why they're red. Like, danger, don't use this. And so if ever I wanted to have waves jutting out from the bottom of this plane, I think that I would need to do something like add a solidify modifier. This would turn this plane into a square, adding an outward facing plane to the bottom. Or not. What? No, wait, yes, it definitely did increase the number of waves I have, but they're still all facing upwards. I really thought they'd be facing downwards. I guess their direction doesn't have to do with the mesh geometry, but the orientation in which the grease pencil object was drawn. So as a learning experiment, I want to see how I could go about having the waves face in the other direction from this plane. What if I select and rotate a grease pencil wave object? No. Okay, if I rotate it and then with Alt-A, apply the rotation, then yes. So this direction has to do with the direction of the grease pencil strokes as they radiate out from their own origin. Applying the rotation, by the way, it just removes the rotation transformation and it made this rotation like the default for this object. This sort of thing is also why the wave instances all start from the grid, even though the waves are located super far away from the grid, super to the side in 3D space. They have location transformations, which do not apply the instances, Unless I did apply the location, then the instances would also be moved very far away from the plane. I could also have drawn the grease pencil wave going downward from its origin to have the wave show up underneath the plane. And that is everything I've gathered about direction when instancing grease pencil objects. Alright, so what next? I guess I did want to give the waves all different rotations along the z-axis so that they would all be turned a bit. So that's this here that I want to randomize. I can plug in a random value node and set it to vector so that I can control along individual axes. So not this one, not this one, but this one. What I learned about this is that to do a full rotation, I think I have to do, was it 2 pi? Which is the shortcut TAU? Not fully sure what that means, but thanks, Arendelle. So yeah, watching them rotate, it does seem like it's around the 7 value that some of them do a full rotation, which is more or less close to the 2 pi value. So that's good to know. But I don't actually think I want a full rotation. I just want a bit of variation around the z-axis. So let me modify that until I get something I think looks nice. I guess this is cute. I don't know, there's probably too many. So I can reduce the density of my distribute points on faces node. Changing the seed also changes how the points get randomly distributed on the face. So this seed of the points distribution made sort of a natural opening in the center where the horse is sitting, and I think I want to do something like that intentionally. Like create a hole in the plane where there is no geometry. I am gonna come back once I've done a little Google searching. Alright, this looks promising. I'm gonna try this out. I'll just bypass all of this for now. And maybe I want to scale up my plane in object mode with S. And then I'll add a cylinder. I'll bring in this join geometry node just so that I can see both of these meshes at the same time. So I want the cylinder to be longer than it is wide. So a transform geometry node would probably be the ticket for that. Alright, so I guess I'll go something like this. Then I want to, I don't know, let me check. Add a mesh boolean, then difference, cylinder at top, and plane at the bottom. That's not right. I think I plugged them in the wrong way. Yes, okay, now this is what I want. Okay, this looks really cool. Now I'll plug everything back in. Wait, something's different. Okay, I did scale up my plane originally, and I think that also scaled up my wave instances. I don't want that. So with Alt-A, I'll apply the scale of my plane object. But I do still want my plane to be even bigger, so I guess I'll duplicate this transform geometry node so that I can increase the size of my plane without affecting the size of my grease pencil wave objects. I think I also want to round the edges of my plane. One day, I hope to know how to do this with geometry nodes, but for today, I think I'll just do that with the actual geometry of my plane. So I'll just go into edit mode, subdivide the geometry of my plane so that I can shrink down these corners with S. Okay, I am liking this. Now I'll spend a bit of time cleaning up my node setup. I'm not the most organized person generally, so I motivate myself to keep a tidy node tree by making it pretty. I like to imagine my node tree as an artwork in itself. So I can drag select a group of nodes, and with Ctrl J, add a box around them. With F2, I rename it. And then in this node sidebar here, I can give it a color, and I usually pick pinks and blues because pretty. Whoa, I just noticed. Look at this line changing color. That's wild. I know that the colors mean something, like purple is vector, but I don't know enough to know why this is changing color. And I'm also confused like why it still works, because I thought having different colors means that the type of value is different. So I'm just surprised that a value can convert itself into another type of value. Alright, so it's been a little bit, and one tutorial later, I now understand somewhat of how animating with geometry nodes works. So I'm going to copy this node group from the tutorial I followed, and I'll paste this whole node group into my other file. So let me break down what I've done. So full disclosure, I can't exactly explain everything. I did just follow a tutorial, and in it, they just rapid fire said what nodes to use without explaining them. So this is the best that I can explain at my current knowledge level. But we're gonna keep learning, it's fine. We made something that looks really cool. So my plan was to animate the size of the waves, thus the scale value of my instance on points node. First up, I add a map range node, apparently. Into this node, I add a noise texture, set it to 4D, and plug the factor into the value. So scrubbing through the W value allows us to see how the animation looks. So that's what I did. Also for the map range node, I changed this value to smooth step, and my min-max values look like this. For the noise texture, I settled on these settings. Honestly, I didn't notice much difference in the settings except for the roughness slider. Before I had it lowered to 0, the animation was super stuttery and jittery, but now at 0, it is beautiful and smooth. And then my understanding is that these other two nodes, which I've been bypassing for now, they're there to help us loop our animation. I'll delete the second noise texture since I've changed so many settings and it's supposed to be an exact copy of the first one. So Shift D to duplicate the first one. And then I want to have a mix node plugged into the value of my map range node, and the factors of the two noise textures plugging into the A and B slots of the mix node. Now I have no idea how long I want my animation to be, but I'll experiment with it at 250 frames. So at frame 1, I want to keyframe the W value at 0. Just press I to keyframe whatever value you're hovering over, and I want to keyframe the mix factor also at 0. Then at the end of our animation, which is currently frame 250, I want to raise the mix factor to 1 and keyframe that. Raise the W value to whatever I want. I can modify this once I see how it looks. Basically though, the larger it is, the faster the animation will be. So I guess I'll start with 2 and keyframe that. And then what I want to do with the second noise texture is I want to do the opposite. So at frame 250, I want this W value to be at 0. I'll keyframe that. And at frame 1, have it be at -2. Now I can play the animation. Oh my gosh, this is actually everything I ever dreamed of. And it loops! Oh my gosh, did you see that? It loops! I'm kind of tempted to do the same sort of animation for the rotation. Currently, I have this random value node which is rotating the waves around the Z-axis, but it's not animated, and I kind of want it to be. So I'll duplicate this box, and this one will be to animate the rotation. So now I'm going to need a node that I learned from the tutorial, but which I originally omitted, and that is the combine XYZ node. I didn't use it for the scale because this node setup is animating all of the values the same, but for the rotation, I only want to rotate along the Z. So this is why I add the combine XYZ node. And now to just play around with the settings for a while. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I don't know. I think I like it. Yeah, it's subtle. I think it fits. I'll keyframe it now. Okay, so with this base, I am now getting ready to finalize the artwork, the geometry nodes included. So first up, I'll set up the camera animation. I basically just want it to rotate around the center So with Shift S, I can send the 3D cursor once again to the world origin, then Shift A to add an empty. This empty will be for the camera rotation. So at frame 1, I keyframe the animation with I, then go to frame 250, rotate around the Z axis 360 degrees, and keyframe that rotation. Then select the camera, Control select the empty, Control P to parent. And this means that now the camera rotates around my scene. So now with this setup, I want to work on the wave objects. I'll start by assigning the base fill stroke to its own layer. I can do this with the shortcut M. I'll turn off lights for this layer and move it beneath my line art layer. Then in vertex paint mode, I can recolor the base of this wave. And then I want to create a new layer for gradients, and to have this layer masked to my base fill layer. So now, with a pencil brush and a large radius, I can brush in some light, soft gradients to this wave. But first I have to switch back to my black stroke material. Also, I have to turn off lights. Alright, this is getting kind of annoying. Another option for just turning off lights is to turn them off for the grease pencil object as a whole. I think I'll do that, so that's in the object settings, visibility, and check off use lights. This is way more handy, and I did end up doing this for all of my grease pencil wave objects. Alright, so now with this new base, I also want to clean up my line art. So I'll do that on the line art layer itself. I can select strokes in edit mode. First, though, I want to turn on auto lock and active layers. And so now I can redraw those strokes in draw mode and then go back into edit mode to delete the original strokes with X. This is how I really enjoy finalizing, turning a sketch into line art with grease pencil. So I've spent a lot of time doing this, and then I can also go back to my gradients layer and add a bit more fine color details once I know where the line art goes. Alright, I love how this is looking. Now to add a bit of variety, I can duplicate this wave because I am imagining having at least 2 types of each wave. I can give it a hue saturation modifier to tint it a slightly different shade of blue. And then I can redo my stage of redrawing the line art just to create a slightly different look for this wave. Cool! And just like that, we have a bit of variety, which I think will add a lot. And now I am going to work on the other waves. And here's how it's looking with the final wave artworks. I did create additional duplicates of the smaller waves because I wanted them to show up more frequently in the artwork than the larger waves. And I'm really happy with the result. I am just thinking I might like to change up the wave placements a bit. There's some overlap that I'm not a huge fan of in some places. There's some empty spaces. And I think the only way I know of how to modify this is to change the seed of the points on face node. So my only solution to this is a bit random, but I've always been able to just modify the seed until I found something that overall looked nice and that I was happy with. Ooh, okay, I just had a thought. So I looked it up, and it seems like there is a way to track the direction of instances to an object. Okay, so what I'm thinking of is that I don't like that in parts of the animation, we see basically that the waves are just like flat objects. In some rotations, it becomes really obvious that they're all flat 2D planes. So I'll be following this tutorial that I found. All of these tutorials are linked. Eventually, I do want to mix this with my current node setup for randomizing the wave rotation, but for now, to set it up, I'll just replace the wave rotation collection box. So it's this look pretty much that I want to avoid. So I can drag my camera into my geometry nodes workspace because that's what I want the waves to track to. Add a position mode and a subtract vector node. Okay, but no, it's actually a vector math node set to subtract, and plug the camera location into the top and the position into the bottom. Then add align Euler to vector and plug that into the rotation. Oh my gosh, this is clearly wrong, but it's doing something for sure. Okay, let me try changing the axes. Oh my gosh, okay, this is it. Oh wow, okay. So now, can I mix the effect of these two? So that the waves are partly aligned, but also partly random. You know what? I'm gonna be back. I have no idea what this map range node does, and I'm so confused. I think I need to find out. Once again, I don't feel in a position to explain this, but this tutorial helped a lot, and so I felt more ready to start modifying these settings. And at this point, a lot of trial and error took place. Eventually, I did find settings that I thought looked nice, but my file was getting really laggy and it was hard to see the animation, so I did a test render. And that's when I noticed this obvious jump in the direction of the waves. Heartbreaking, I know. So from what I've been able to tell, this new node setup has all of the waves pointing in the same direction always. But the original randomized node setup still has them turning with the camera rotation. And so using the mix node to try and mix the two results, I guess in a way they're working against one another. And so at some point, it just like it hits a point where the waves just have to flip themselves to like correct the fact that they're in opposite directions. So I tried and could not figure out a way to remove this effect entirely. I think it just has to do with the node setup combination that I have going. So then I tried making it less obvious. I tried using an empty as the pivot point, so I could make it the other axes as my camera. And I likewise modified the axes for this node setup. Honestly, I don't know if this really did anything. It kind of seems to me like the transformation now, it starts more from the back rather than the front. So like, to me, that seems visually a little bit less obvious. And I should say, I also did reduce the mix factor so that it is mostly the tracking node setup affecting the waves. And there's just the smallest effect of the randomization. And this has made so that the resulting jump is also much smaller. This may honestly have been a more trouble than it was worth, but you know what? Whatever. The point of this is to learn geometry nodes, and I feel like I gained a lot of knowledge, even if it did start going slightly off the rails here. So I think I'm just gonna leave it at this. So the rest of the finalizing that I did to my node setup was just modifying the different settings of the nodes that I already have, doing test renders to see how everything looked. I ended up making the camera animation slower, and I also made some of the node animations less intense. If you'd like to have a look at my final settings, I have made my final blend file free to download. That is just going to be in the description box below. I hope that's helpful. If you'd like to dive a little bit deeper into my process, there is some bonus paid content on Patreon and also on my Gumroad. This ended up being a lot more ambitious than I was expecting, but I am so proud of the results, and I'm feeling a lot more confident in my understanding of this tool. And I've been having a lot of fun planning future projects combining geometry nodes and grease pencil now that I understand more. So stay tuned for more adventures into geometry node. Exciting. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you have any tips or resources that you'd like to share with me, I always super appreciate that. I am so glad that you're here. I'll see you again very soon. Bye.